together, having met each other, we understood grief. We understood the cycle of grief. We understood you have to go through grief. I was talking to a pastor this week, and he had lost his wife a few years ago, and he never grieved. And I thought, I don't get that, because I grieved. And then he told me this week, finally, grief just burst forth, and he was there and realized that he needed to grieve and weep before God. So, understanding grief, then my wife and I, we started working for hospice, started sharing our testimony and teaching and sharing with surviving spouses, and then we started teaching the same at MCC on grief. And so we took all that together and started ministering by what we learned. No matter what we experience, God is there teaching us. Whether it's in a pit or coming out of the pit, God is present. So the third point would be realize that self-promotion can never replace divine promotion. Joseph tried self-promotion when he told his father and his brothers, I had a dream and God told me you're going to bow down to me someday. That's self-promotion. Well, then he went through all these torturous experiences, this maturing experiences, and then he was finally presented to Pharaoh after he had learned his lesson. So let God promote, not man promote, or certainly not yourself. So he knew his success came from God, and all of our successes come from God. Trust God. Through it all, trust God. And so he gave God the credit. And the only advancement that matters is the kind that God gives. I understood grief. My wife understands grief. We understand the deep waters. Pastor Kevin has us sing that song on Sundays, that take me out into deep waters, where my head's going to go under, where I need God. When you experience deep waters, then the babbling brooks don't really mean much to you. And you realize a lot of people are living their lives in babbling brooks, just babble, 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 and all this issues that, psychology calls that monkey mind. Their mind just all the time, and you look at them and you think, why are you doing that? Just calm down. The deep waters run still. The deep waters are quiet. The deep waters quiet your soul. And so often, that's where we hear God. That's where we know we have a relationship with God, when we're in the deep waters and He's there. And so finally, Joseph learned his lesson, and he gave God the credit. The fourth point I want to bring out is when the dream is realized, whatever God has given you, it's sweeter than you can ever imagine. When God gives you a dream, it's sweeter and greater than you can ever imagine. When I had the dream of starting a church, and I had in my mind what the church would be like, the typical type church I was raised, and I didn't get any of that after it was all over. I come through the pit, the dark time, took me into grief. Now the church was still functioning all that time, but what God was doing with me was taking me into deep waters to find out what was really important and what was not. God and each other are important. The rest is just babbling brook. It's all going to pass away one day. But your relationship, your love with God, and the love with each other will not pass away. And so when we go into deep waters, we understand what's important. We need to share the love of God with whomever we can, especially if they're in a time that is trying to them. So the fulfillment of the dream was worth the wait. The fulfillment of the dream, I got to help people in hospice for 21 years. I got to teach in a Catholic seminary for 11 years about the chaplaincy and grief and MCC. But what was interesting was the fulfillment of God given a desire to help the bikers, or God given a desire to minister to the church in a way that the church is now prepared to accept anybody at any time. Is somebody looking for God? They can find God in this church. They can find God from the people in this church because they've been taught and they've had ears to hear. They understand what the depth of God is, not the babbling brooks running from church to church and running from doctrine and fear and facts and all. No, just walking with God at all the time in their life. And that's called spiritual development. And that's where we are in this church. So Joseph went through the hard times, and he ends up saving all of Israel. And I think about how many people, hundreds, I've led to the Lord on their deathbed and their families. I've had 2 times where anywhere from 12 to 15 family members were in the room. The patriarch was dying, and he wanted to accept the Lord, and the family members said, we want to accept the Lord too, after I explained how easily they could ask Jesus into their life, how easily he, while he was dying, could ask Christ into his life there on the deathbed, and they all did. Now, I don't know what kind of commitment they had afterwards, but I know it was a serious time with God, and people accepted God. Well, I never would have been there had I not been in the pit and understand grief. And so don't discount the grief that's in your life or that you've experienced, or failures or frustrations. God is developing you. And so the realization of my dream for starting a church exceeded my expectation. I can't even imagine, would not have imagined what God was doing with me and with this church. And so he's prepared us all along to receive more and more from him, with the understanding that he's in control. And so give your dreams, or let God give you your dreams, and let them be vivid in your mind. Hold them dear to your heart, and know, love, love, love. God is with me in the good times, and God is with me in the hard times. Remember that tonight. Pass that on to your family and to others that you'll see this week. The Lord bless you.